Hello, everybody. This is going to be another one of those great Beach Brothers shows. I want to let you know that this is going to be sort of a deep dive scenario. So let's first start with the introduction for the show itself.
So look, the Beach Brothers Show is a show where we deal with Virginia business and politics.
Well, I'm Conrad Chesviner. I'm a Hampton Roads political activist. The best ideas for community improvement happen to drive me.
I help folks that are approaching retirement and in their retirement years.
I have what I call the empowerment agenda. And that means that everything I do is focused on empowerment. You want to give a salute to Tally and Twine. It's time for you to have a high quality watch made in Virginia, made in Portsmouth, Virginia, from Tally and Twine. We want to say thanks to Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier for their great level of sponsorship. If you need a new car, you don't need to go far. Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier. And ladies, if you want your brows to say, wow, check out IamLitaWee.com. Microblading by IamLitaWee.com. I'm Seiko Varner. I do credit fixes, tax resolutions. I lend private money to real estate investors, and we do debt consolidations. If you need any of these services, contact me as provided. And now it's time to get beachy on the Beach Brothers Show.
The last time that little clip ended and I did a show, it didn't unmute me, so I'm glad I was able to click unmute here so you could be able to hear me at the beginning. Tonight we're going to look at the results of last week's Virginia elections and what they mean for Democrats statewide and locally, whether locally around the 757 or stately to the 202-804-540-703-571-276 and the 434. You need a quality car to get around. Southern Volkswagen provides you that. On 1248 South Military Highway, you'll find it. Hop over, reach out to Charlie Roy, and he'll get you a quality car to drive from the Shenandoah to the beach. 1248 South Military Highway, Charlie Roy, and Southern Volkswagen. Now back to last week's election results. Virginia held a statewide race for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, plus all the delegate seats were up for grabs as well. The result was a large Republican victory. They swept the top three spots, and they turned the House of Delegates red as important Democrats like delegates Aird, Mugler, Askew, and Guy lost their races. Guy and Askew both from Virginia Beach. This big swing has ramifications and hopefully lessons for the Democratic Party of Virginia, and I reached out across the state for important voices that could help represent Democratic passions of, and also the party of the Democrats. And let's bring them all on tonight. So, Ms. Nicole, if you could unmute yourself and just give a little bit of the explanation of yourself and where you're from.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Sanders. I'm actually a resident of Norfolk, Virginia, and I actually was a candidate on the ballot in this last upcoming election.
How about introduce yourself just a little bit, Miss Andrea Jackson?
Hi, I'm Andrea Jackson, and I've been the chair of the Waynesboro Democratic Committee, as well as the vice chair this year, and just done some volunteering and different things of that nature.
All right. Let's bring on Mr. Mike Maskell. Just a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Mike Maskell. I'm former treasurer of the Virginia Beach Democratic Committee, and now I'm the one of the founding members and the chair of the Virginia Beach Progressive Caucus.
Let me just throw that up on the screen real quick. Let's bring on Miss Vanjie Williams. Just a little bit about yourself real quick.
Hey, I'm Vanjie Williams, former congressional candidate for the 1st District of Virginia and aspiring to fix Virginia politics.
Also, I heard most of that, but it was very faint. I didn't hear any of the bowling, but I did hear most of what you said, so that's good. Let's see if we can bring on Mr. Monteague Magruder. I believe he's on audio at the moment. So if you'd like to jump in and just tell us a little bit about himself. And if not, I heard he might be driving. And also, as I run this show, I want you guys to notice that I think some of the Facebook versions of the feed have went down. Not the YouTube, but the Facebook. So the show is still going, but I don't know what that says about the Facebook. And let's bring on, of course, Miss Andrea Dixon in Norfolk. Just a little bit about yourself.
Hello, my name is Andrea Dixon. I am the vice chair of the community action team here in Norfolk and the Hampton Roads area. I volunteered with Democrats previously, and I'm here to be able to fix America and Virginia.
Excellent. To save a little bit of screen space, I'm going to try and take myself off the screen, but keep everyone else. So, right. All right. So how about this? We're going to go to that very first thing to consider, and that's about how national the race was. The following is a quote from a post-election Terry memo. To that, I mean Terry McCullough. While we projected the race to be tight heading into Election Day, Youngkin was able to capitalize on strong overall turnout and a negative national climate for Democrats in order to win. So what exactly was that negative national climate for Democrats, and what exactly did that do to the race? Let us start with Ms. Nicole.
Personally, it did a lot of damage. There were some Democrats that were still, kind of upset that Terry did not allow the other candidates to have the opportunity to run the race. And even outside of Democrats, when speaking to other voters on why they why they voted for Mr. Youngkin, it was his personality that won them over. They did their homework. They were out there. They knew what to say. They knew how to get to the voters, and they made their presence known.
Right. Now, I'm going to try and keep it as such that I don't want to go in turns so much. It's just if you have opinions real quick, let's try to make it very chatty. So let's bring some more back on. Who else would like to tabulate to touch on how national in scope this race was?
And this is Angie. So Nicole is on point. So this is where we all went wrong with this. First of all, Terry McCullough should not have been in the race. Where we went wrong was simply this. We allowed the party again to dictate who was going to be on the ballot at the top of the ticket. And what happens with that is you have a whole group, a whole segment of people who is completely forgotten. For instance, the rural community was completely forgotten by the Terry McCullough ticket. Completely. And Youngkin took advantage of that. The education ticket, oh my God, in the rural community, it was a winning strategy. And sadly, they got it wrong. They got it completely wrong for again. Not even third time again.
Hey, y'all.
I just want to say that in regards to how the national race affected locally, with Terry being a corporate candidate and who he was, the national focus was on another corporate candidate, which was President Joe Biden. And the lack of actual follow through on a lot of the things that he said he was going to do. $15 minimum wage wasn't getting done. Student loans were just behind, just never going to talk about it. Don't even speak about single payer option anymore. And a lot of voters, as it was reflected in his poll numbers, decreasing, particularly in rural Black voters, rural voters specifically, and his Latino voters, it trickled down. And it trickled down to the local races as well. And if Democrats can't be able to put up something for them people to vote for, they're not going to vote for you.
Ms. Nakia, I know you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself earlier, but just a little bit about who you are, what part of the Democrats you might represent, and where you're from in Virginia.
Um, well, I'm Nakia, and I am a lifelong resident of the peninsula. I'm an activist, and I am extremely civically engaged. I mean, I wear many, many, many hats. I consider myself a liberal leaning independent. I am not someone who just blindly follows party line stuff.
Yes.
But when it comes towards where I do lean, I am extremely liberal leaning. Um, Platform issues for me: education, voting rights, um, which I mean includes ROR, restoration of rights, um, education, reproductive rights. Those are absolutely some platform issues for me. Some things that I'm extremely passionate about, and my kids
All
in
right, all right.
any and whatever that includes.
All right. Now, before I jump away from the nationalized version of topics here, Miss Andrea Jackson and Mr. Mike Masculli, have any, Mr. Monteith as well, any thoughts that you might have on nationalization of the race itself?
Well, I personally believe, like as was mentioned earlier about the failed promises of the Biden administration, that is definitely a major issue. You have some people that voted for Youngkin because, like you said, education, but mainly because they kept hearing the talk of critical race theory, and that's something that they didn't want to confront, so they voted for Youngkin because of that. But one of the things that we have to remember is that a lot of Virginians, especially people like myself, have a long memory. We remember the things that Terry McAuliffe did or did not do when he was when he was previously governor of Virginia. For example, I ran for the House of Delegates in 2017 as a Green Party candidate, and I was in Charlottesville while Terry McAuliffe was governor on the very day that terrorist attack happened, which Heather Heyer got killed. I was right across the street in Charlottesville from that incident. People like me remember that, remember the inaction that taken by Terry McAuliffe to really hold people accountable, and they also remember the fact that the pipelines, the Atlantic Coast and Mountain Valley pipelines that McAuliffe tried to build through Virginia, which required the construction of a special compressor station in one of the black communities of Buckingham County. People remember those type of things, and they see that the Democrat Party refuses to hold big money juggernauts like McCullough accountable for his previous actions. And so voters at the polls, especially people like myself, decided to make him pay. I personally chose to vote for Princess Blanding because I'm if you were to look at my viewpoints, I would be considered either a socialist or a communist, depending on what issue it is. So I'm probably the furthest left leaning person out of everybody in this stream.
All right, all
Well,
right.
question, and I wanna jump into that, um, with what Terry McAuliffe could have done in his previous in his the administration in which he was in charge. I I really want to understand what he could have done to, I guess, make the individuals who were responsible for what happened in Charlottesville, um, and what happened with Heather Heyer. When at the time that he was governor, he didn't have control of the General Assembly, and what and I'm just trying to understand. And I mean, and this is not me, capping for Terry. It's more so playing devil's advocate. Um, especially when the jackass that ran her over ended up not only catching state charges but caught federal charges. What 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 else could he do? That's what I'm trying to understand. Because whereas I will absolutely be the first person to say that Terry was in no capacity a perfect candidate. I
More on
personally,
that in a second.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
I
what I'm saying is that what else could he do in that circumstance?
that might be a good topic for another show.
You mind if I answer that right quick?
I don't mind. If you
Sorry
just
about
give me
that.
a second.
I'm gonna just make it very quick. Sorry about that. I'm sitting in my car at the moment. But so Terry McAuliffe is in control of the state police. Word has it that on the day that took place, he ordered state police to stand down. So that should be something that we got some answers on at that time, but we never got answers on that. And so, like I said, people have that memory, and they're going to make them pay for it, just like they within this election. And
Yeah,
the thing is, the Democrats, in my opinion, the moment that he got in the race and steamrolled Jennifer Keller Foy and Jennifer McClellan out the race, they should have been holding his feet to the fire right then and there. But like I said,
We'll touch on that.
it's all about the money. It's all, in my opinion, it's all about the money with the Democrats. They will never, ever, ever question big money when it comes to their party.
That's right.
I mean, that, like I said, that could be its own show on its own. So I'm gonna step back.
Yeah, let's do that someday. But tonight, I already sort of have questions that I've written down in advance. So, Miss Andrea Jackson.
Yeah, I'd like to address the part that he said about the pipeline, because there was something that he could have done about that, because that specifically affected here in Augusta and Nelson County, which he did not campaign once because he did not want to confront that issue. And I think that, sometimes pride cometh before the fall. And he could have said, hey, in 2014, I supported this, but, I've evolved and, Virginia has evolved and we're not moving forward with this. And this is not something that I support anymore. But he didn't do any of that. He didn't at least ask those people or have a conversation with them. And you know what I mean? Like, he was very arrogant and he felt like, I don't need the rural votes. I'm going to focus on, Nova and Richmond and Tidewater and the cities. And you know what I mean? Like, that's on him. You know what I mean? And for me as a person, if he would have asked for my vote, maybe I would have given it to him. But you know what I mean? He's not entitled to my vote. And no Democrat is. You have to campaign. And
many of these problems could have been addressed by just actually campaigning.
Thank you. Thank you. Right there.
Nationally, comparing on the Democrat side, the McAuliffe campaign suffered from the same thing that the Biden administration is now suffering from. That's lack of enthusiasm among everybody, among their own campaign even. I mean, it's like the Democratic Party does not realize what everyone else in the country realizes, which is that the presidential election in 2020 was not the result of enthusiasm for Joe Biden. It was the result of enthusiasm against Donald Trump. And without something like that, we have to offer more than just a recycled old candidate of the same, thing, and then assume that everybody's just going to vote for him.
Yes.
I mean, the Republicans actually campaigned hard in this state. A whole lot harder than the McAuliffe campaign did, in a whole lot more of a coordinated way. And that brings back to the national topic for the Republicans. The way they haven't really used national issues directly in the states, but they've used a national strategy. All this stuff about critical race theory in schools and flooding school board meetings to make ridiculous protests about masks and vaccines and everything. Those things are happening all over the country, and they're happening all over the country, not because all these people are having the same idea at the same time, but because they're getting instructions from organizations like the Heritage Foundation that have a strategy in mind to do this kind of thing, to basically campaign on with an army of straw men. The CRT issue is particularly egregious in this response. It's straw man argument on top of straw man argument, because not only is critical race theory not a part of grade school education, but it also doesn't teach the things that they say it teaches. And that's a particularly difficult thing to argue with in a rational manner, because it's an argument that's based on rejecting evidence and facts. So,
CRT is like, it was the Republicans' version of a racist dog whistle. Exactly. Is what it was.
And they've dressed it up sufficiently now that we identified immediately as such.
But you got to remember something. Terry put his foot in his mouth during his forum, where he could have just shut down and stopped. Now, this is the thing. I'm going to come back from a federal candidate level. So 3 things happened in this state that most people didn't realize. There was no coordinated campaign at all in Virginia. So the reality is, without a coordinated campaign, the people running for delegate seats, nobody on the top ticket to hit them. Second problem, when Terry jumped in the race, and when Jennifer Carroll Foy jumped in the race, you had a problem that was created. The dynamics are this: you have 2 Black women who are going to balance out the vote. They're going to push the votes to the one white guy, and that's exactly what happened. Black women have been notoriously famous for voting for Black women, and we split the vote for the Black women, and Terry won that seat. But did Terry deserve to be on the ticket in the first place? He should have stayed out of this. He had already done his time, and he jacked this up for us. And the Democratic Party just sat there and said, okay, Terry, you raised $24 million, go for it. But they didn't help the Black candidates or the candidates of color at all in these races. Shame on Virginia Democrats. Shame on them. I won't say it, they're not going to like it, but shame on them.
But, for real, that is, and this is a conversation that I've had more than, in some ways, more than I've wanted to, since the election, but it's a needed conversation and it's important, is that the issues that we're talking about, the fact that, Terry, should have stayed out of this when we had 2 women of color who were in the primary. I agree with you on that. But when you have individuals who are part of the Democratic Party of Virginia who do nothing but serve their own interests, then you get what you get. Because, I would love to at this point start calling people out by name, but it's not going to do anything, because they don't serve the people, they serve themselves. And you have those candidates, like the election cycle prior to this, I was a card-carrying Perriello fan. But, the Democratic Party in Virginia, even though they couldn't officially endorse Ralph Northam, that was who they were looking towards. And, we ran into this the last election cycle. Now, this election cycle that just passed, as much as I like and respect Terry McAuliffe, he should have stayed out of it when the 2 Jennifers entered the race. And you weren't, regardless of how much time Jennifer Carroll Foy and Jennifer McClellan have put in the good work in the Commonwealth, when you have those individuals who, are part of the DPVA who want to call in favors and who want to be in the spotlight and who want to get all this grant money and think that Terry is going to be their white horse, this is what you get. So there's that.
Yeah, I mean, the optics of it should have been obvious to anybody of this, old politics, white male candidate coming barging in and bulldozing the two black women candidates out of the way. I mean, how did they not know how that would look?
And he
Agreed.
Well,
should have had self-awareness.
Well, my thing is that we keep on thinking that these candidates are serving themselves. Like they're serving the interest of corporate donors. They're serving the interest of Verizon, AT&T, Dominion Energy, and all the other corporations that put money in their back pocket. And they're not going to sit there and tell them no. Gene Magruder, who is one of the chairs, I believe, down in the Hampton Roads area of one of the Democratic committees, he's not going to tell them no, stop giving us corporate money. Ain't none of them going to tell those corporate donors to stop giving them money. It's too lucrative.
I did. I ran on a federal ticket and did not take one corporate dollar. In fact, Publix sent me $3 and I sent it back to Publix with a note saying no thank you. This is how weird this is. I mean, I know you're not talking about me, but but this is the problem.
That's all I was going to say.
I did that intentionally because I wanted to prove that you can run for office without taking corporate dollars. But what I did not expect was that the Democratic Party would not back the only black candidate in the entire state in that federal race. I was the only black candidate. I was a historical candidate, and I did better than any of them with $500,000. What we have to do is change campaign finance. This became a campaign finance issue as soon as Terry got in the race. And I'm gonna tell you, I was asked this question on a radio show the other day. Who did I want to see on the primary ticket? And my answer was Jennifer McClellan and Mark Herring for governor, Sam Roussel and Hala Ayala for lieutenant governor, and for attorney general, Jennifer Carroll Foy and Jay Jones. Tell me that would not have been an excellent ticket to vote on. Instead, we got picked again. Well, actually, Hala did a hell of a job in her campaign.
She did.
She had to do what she had to deal with. But we could have had Jennifer McClellan, Hala Ayala, and Jennifer Carroll Foy as the three women running the state. And they shut it down because of arrogance, greed, corporate greed, and like you said, misguided interests. Who are you running for? Yourself? Or are you running for the people? And I'm going to tell you, I live in King George. I had people who voted for me, Trump, and then were like, I can't vote for Terry McCullough. I'm voting for Youngkin. I couldn't convince them.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to point out this one issue because I'm noticing this, and this is something that has been an issue with the Biden administration. Goes back to the national point, is that there's been this often trend of the Democrat Party basically disenfranchising or tossing aside black voters, and then expecting that those same black voters will still go ahead and vote for them anyway. Like we see, for example, like was pointed out earlier, Biden has not followed through on his campaign promises that he's made to the black community. Whereas the Police Accountability Commission that he said he was going to put in place has not happened. We're looking at what happened here in Virginia. Like I said, McAuliffe basically bet against the black vote when he decided to put himself into the race. He bet against the black vote and he wound up coming up snake-eyed. And I would say this to basically everybody in the black community that's listening to this: we need to continue that trend. We need to continue telling the Democrats no, no, and hell no until they finally agree and they follow through on the promises that they make to us. We keep on, like I said, we keep on hearing they're gonna do something about police accountability. They're gonna do something about reparations and all these other issues. then they get in the power and they ignore us outright, or they tell us, "Oh, we can't do that because that would be too controversial." But yet they're now talking about giving $450,000 to immigrants. You know what I'm saying? Because of what was going on at the border, but they won't give black people, specifically the descendants of slaves in the U.S. They won't give us $450,000, and we still continuing to suffer hardships, some of which at the behest of the U.S. government.
Well,
Stuff
here's the
like
thing.
vaccine mandates.
Here's the thing I was gonna say, that I think we all need to start maybe be a little more realistic about just in general, that the Democratic Party already believes that black vote as a voting block is a monolith. So it doesn't matter what stuff they go and say. If they just say the buzzwords, reparations or police reform
Right.
or criminal justice or prison, then you guys will just go right ahead and vote because you have nowhere else to go.
Yeah,
And you're
they
not gonna
expect us to be one note.
like one note, and you're not going to vote against your interests, so you're going to just go ahead and vote for us. It doesn't matter who we put up. It doesn't matter what we don't give you. And Ms. Vinci said that black women are notorious for voting for black women until it came to Winston Sears when we didn't vote her in. So it is, we need to be more real. We need to be realistic about our politicians and be like, and to be honest and say, they don't care about us. They just are telling us what we want to hear, and we have to listen. We cannot listen to what they say anymore. We have to listen to where the money is and what the policies are. If they're not talking money and policy, I don't have nothing else to say to you.
Don't get me started on Winston Sears.
Exactly.
But what I'm also going to offer up, in regards to that is that what ends up happening is, where your workforce, your worker bees, those people who are the boots on the ground that are doing the grunt work, that those people that are in those upper echelons aren't willing to do. They always get, kind of stomped on in the entire process, because as a grunt, as a field organizer, as an activist, there's absolutely just ridiculous amount of man hours that I put into just this work, from being a liberal leaning independent, that should allow for more people like me to have voices at the table. But that's not what happens. It's like you said, it's corporate money. It's those individuals who want to stick themselves into places where they can show their faces and take credit for stuff that they didn't do. It's for those people who are in those high level party positions that don't give a damn about anybody but themselves. And Conrad knows that right now I'm at the point where I don't give a shit about naming names. I'm just going to shut my mouth right now. But
expose them.
But that's something that continues to go through the cogs and continues to move, around and around and around and around. Because let's get real. How many times did you see the NAACP for any city in the Commonwealth come out strong for either of the Jennifers? How often did you see, these individuals who hold these high capacity offices with these, political groups, or with these separate groups, sit there and literally make the request or the demand that, look, if you choose to overlook candidates of color, or if you choose to overlook especially Black women, then you're going to catch the backlash that you're not expecting. And it wasn't said, because if it was said to the DPVA, if it was said to the individuals who hold those high echelon offices, then maybe they would have listened a little bit better and we wouldn't have ended up where we are right now, which is where, unfortunately, because Terry made a gaffe and Glenn Youngkin was able to take it and push it way out of context. You had these, these people who are too stupid to use Google to define CRT, and people who were just like, I'm disenfranchised, so fuck it, I'm not going to the polls.
But there was more to it than that. So
Yeah, indeed.
it was more to it than that. So CRT, we know, is taught at a college level. But this is what it was. And I said this the other day. There were two big lies. There was a Republican big lie. We know what that was. But the Democratic big lie was, oh, Black Lives Matter. Oh, this and that. Guess what? That doesn't win seats, especially in the rural communities. And I have said this. I told Conrad this earlier. I'm really considering running for the DPVA chair. I'm really considering it. Because see, this is the problem. People like me, you, I don't care who you are. If you are not one of those party insiders, you are outside the party.
Absolutely.
The first time I went to DPVA when I ran for Congress, I was literally told, you don't have a shot in hell. You're not going to come anywhere close. This is what we're going to offer you. And this came from a brother, okay? This is what we're going to offer you. We're going to offer you one email, and we're going to give you the proceeds of that email. That was a lie, because those dollars that came from that email that went out went to the 3 white females at the top of that were on the ticket with me. So think about that. And
I'll tell you this much.
I just wanted to, Nakia, you made a point about the NAACP getting involved. First off, they're a nonpartisan organization. They are not allowed to engage in the endorsement of political candidates or standing behind political candidates. Are not allowed to do that. That's literally, they are prohibited from doing that.
They may not be able to do it officially. Hold on. They may not be able to do it officially, but
okay,
every NAACP in the Commonwealth steers events around candidates that they want to see in office.
Okay.
Like I said, I understand that the NAACP can't flat out sit there and say, oh, yes, we endorse this candidate. No, they can't do that. That's a violation of 501c3.
Exactly.
But don't get it twisted. The NAACP, what the NAACP chooses to do, and the ways they choose to do it in order to provide a spotlight to the candidates that whoever the chair of the NAACP supports. So, whereas it may not be an official statement, that doesn't mean that especially the branch level NAACPs don't have the ability to exert influence, especially in communities of color, on how they feel people should vote and who they should vote for. And I also think that it is not an irony that a lot of the chairmen of the NAACP are high-level party officials. So that's not a coinky-dink. And, for real, especially with the reorg for the DPVA, look, I can't tell you who I would support outright because I don't know who's all on the ballot, but I can tell you who I'm not going to support, and I'm going to leave it right there.
Okay, and the second point that I wanted to make is this. Everybody talks about having a voice at the table. I'm not looking for having a voice at the table. I want power. I want power at the table. I want to be able to make controlling decisions. That's what I'm looking for. If I'm going to have any involvement in the Democrat Party, it's going to be an involvement of power, where I'm one of the people directing the flow of money to candidates that I feel need to support. And that's what people, anybody that's going for the top spots in the DPVA chair, whatever, that's what they should be focusing on. Okay, they may be trying, they may have some other aspirations, but the thing is, they need to be seeking controlling, making decisions where people, where people who are actually running on a solid progressive platform will be able to have funds directed towards them and other resources. But a lot of people are not thinking like that. Like I said, that's why we wind up, while people like me, for example, I wound up getting turned off just because I saw how things were done by the Democrats. I used to live in Richmond. I saw some of the corruption firsthand, so I'm pretty much aware.
All right, now, Mike, I think you're
as for the nonprofit issue with the 501c3 status, I'm not sure about this. I'd have to look it up. But is it really partisan to endorse a candidate in a primary? Because I mean, it's within the same party.
Yes.
We need to change that, because that's a pretty important role for organizations like the NAACP, to, especially in primaries. I mean, I can understand, okay, we don't endorse in a general election, but in the primary, if progressives are ever going to get taken seriously and be made the candidate in general elections, we need to be able to have organizations get behind progressives in the primary to compete with the old school politics.
Yeah, it is illegal for any organization that is a 501c3 to endorse any candidate at any state, whether it be a primary, whether it be in a general election, or any of that. It's illegal. And the only type of nonprofit that is allowed to have a nonprofit status and endorse a candidate is a 501c4, and that's a PAC.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Which does not have to disclose donors.
Right. Don't get me started on that. That's a conversation in its own entirety.
Now, I hope you guys can see the full entirety of the screen wall, because I want to put up a picture here from the vice mayor of Portsmouth. Terry McAuliffe didn't lose because people didn't vote. He lost because people didn't want him. He was not a good candidate, nor was our community going to benefit from him. Of course, neither will we benefit from Youngkin. He lost because the Democratic leadership is yet to realize that this is not their grandma's Democratic Party. Stop trying to pick your candidates for our generation. So I wanted to throw that out there because I really liked
I think
Andrea
that's
Jackson.
Sorry.
Yeah, she threw her finger up there.
Oh, no, I want to say that that's absolutely correct. And I just feel like, at the end of the day, politics, all of this is a numbers game. And Terry McAuliffe barely won in 2013. You know what I mean? And he spent 4 times as much as Ken Cuccinelli. And the simple fact is he won because of Black people who voted at 90% and Black women at 91%. So the simple fact that he did that to the 2 Jennifers, it just was mind-boggling. I was like, how is he going to win? You know what I mean? And I seriously think that, it was like how like y'all was saying about we all voted for Joe Biden, but that was because we're trying to save democracy. We didn't want Trump, you know what I mean? And they were trying to push that, vote blue no matter who. And it just wasn't going to work, you know what I mean, in Virginia. And I think people said we're not doing that.
I don't like the phrase vote blue no matter who, because they don't want you to be the blue.
Yeah, or they could have very well just let the 2 Jennifers fight it out. That would have been a very good primary. And, they always want to force on us a candidate. I mean, literally, it says a lot about DPVA that there was, 2 Black women, a Black man, and a Democratic socialist. And Terry McAuliffe was like, oh, I can come up in here and this is easy. And this is for me because I've been in DPVA for a while and I came back in because I genuinely wanted to see change, but I'm done with it. Democratic Party of Virginia has its own racist, classist, and sexist issues that they need to deal with before they start pointing the fingers at Republicans. And until they deal with their issues and the internal hierarchy that they have within the state, then there's not going to be any change. And like that person says, this isn't your grandmother's. Why did that's like this was like going back to the future? Why is this was like 2013 all over again? This is 2021. Like nobody could read the room. Nobody wants a white savior. And I just, I mean, and then after us, then let me get on this high horse right quick. All of this money that they spent, and you still have a shit campaign. Like, at least if you're gonna sell your soul to the devil, at least get your money's worth. Yo, I don't understand what happened, yo. How do you spend this much money? Like this was the most expensive election in Virginia history, and it's just terrible.
With no coordinated campaign.
Yeah, and then
Still,
it's like
how can
selfish.
you do this with no coordinated campaign?
They didn't include any of the delegates. They didn't even contact them half the time when they're in the area. It just was so self-centered. And like he sucked the life out of every potentially good progressive delegate, campaign. Like he just sunk everybody's ship because he wanted power.
Mm-hmm. Now, I actually got a couple of things that I want to throw up on the screen relating to that. So let's definitely keep our minds on that topic. Now, Mr. Mike, I think you were roughly around this time saying that you might want to duck on out. Is that still true?
I didn't catch your question, actually. Sorry.
Yeah, right around here at 8:15, you said you might be leaving. So if any time you feel you need to go, that's perfectly fine.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right. I did want to comment on that.
Yeah.
Right quick, because one of the things I'm noticing, and this is within the Black community that I've noticed as well, is that there is some sort of generational divide amongst the Black community, because you see a lot of the people that still, a lot of Black people that still vote Democrat. There are mainly people that are, I would say, about age 50 and up that still, believe the Democrat Party is going to do something for them. And then, but when you go further down in the age range, like say from 18 to like 45, for example, people in that age group, they automatically turned off by the Democrat Party unless that candidate comes through and says, I'm going to do these specific actions if I'm elected. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that we have to remember. That if anybody goes through and breaks down the Black vote in this election in terms of age, y'all going to see that play out.
Mm-hmm. And actually, there's a couple of people who actually did do that, and they found that under 30 dropped by 10% in Virginia. I could speak for my generation. I'm a millennial, and we grew up with grew up under Reaganomics, Reagan philosophy, Reagan policies, Reagan everything, and we watched Bush won, lie us into war. We watched the financial crisis. We watched Obama come and promise us the world and gave us not the world. And then we watched Trump come along. So we've seen all of these politicians from local to national just promise us everything and not give us anything. And at the same time, then blame us because of the things that they did in the societies and the policies and procedures that they've done. And the things that we want, there's a reason why a large group of my generation is leading more towards progressive and socialistic ideas, is because we are not living of the years of yesterday. We don't care what you did for my grandmother. I want to know what you're going to do for me. And if you're not going to do anything for my generation and just keep telling me, well, I helped you with this, that was 30 years ago. I was 4. What do you want me to do about that? I need something today. And we are a generation of instant gratification. And if you're not going to give me something, we don't have to deal with you. We'll unfriend you. We'll move on, and we'll find somebody else to deal with. We don't have to deal with you.
Yeah, election dynamics are different for Democratic and Republican candidates. I mean, Democratic candidates have to campaign harder in general than Republican candidates, because the standard for us for winning or losing isn't how many voters flip to Republican. We don't have that big of a margin of error. We lose if they just don't vote. So, it's not, we don't have as much wiggle room as we like to make ourselves think we do, because we have to actually get people excited. And, it's very rare that we have something like Donald Trump. Hopefully it is very rare from here on, that is, such a catastrophe that, people can be motivated by that alone. I mean, we have to get people excited about a candidate, and for that, you have to have something new.
Now, that turnout thing is another thing I want to throw up on the screen right here. I made this little graphic here, just a little comparison of 2020 votes all the way to 2021 votes. And where's my little stats that I had on that one? Democrats dropped off about 900,000 votes from last year to this year, so they lost about 34% of their voting bloc. Third parties dropped 42,000. They didn't have that much to begin with, so 65%. And then Republicans dropped 202,000, which is about 15%. Let me bring that off the screen here. Basically, they held on to their voting bloc from last year, and the Democrats collapsed because, as you just mentioned, not voting is actually an option.
Yeah, and the thing, one of the things that's going to make people not want to vote is that they keep running against Trump. Trump is out of power. Trump is out of power. He has nothing to do with nothing. Yes, we may be going through some residual effects of his policies, but he's no longer in power. So Democrats, in my opinion, need to stop running against Trump. If Trump is not in the White House, then stop running against them, because that's just turning people off. Another thing, vaccine mandates. People got turned off by that. And another point, because I noticed on the graph, you look at Princess Blanding's vote totals, was like around 22,000.
Yep.
So nobody can go around blaming Princess Blanding for costing the Democrats an election, because the amount of votes that she got, even if you gave that to Terry McAuliffe, he would have still lost.
Yeah,
he would have still lost anyway.
I had a good I had a good graphic for your first point as well. That's from Delegate Sam Rizzo. We need to rethink the way we campaign in Virginia. We spend entirely too much time talking about Donald Trump. We should articulate not only our vision for the future, but spend time genuinely connecting with people and their needs. He has this little news link from Virginia Mercury. It's talking about gimmicky stuff tying it to Trump. And that little flyer there, where it's deliberately trying to bring people to think about Donald Trump and Glenn Youngkin at the same time, was paid for and operated by the Democratic Party of Virginia.
And they had another thing that they did. I saw it on YouTube. I'm sorry, but they had this one commercial. I don't know if anybody else saw it. It says everybody cares about their neighborhood except for the person who didn't vote. Did anybody else?
I saw that.
I'm like, okay, so you're gonna blame me because I'm not interested in voting for you instead of doing that same amount of time and giving me a policy that you were going to do that was going to hire
me for marketing.
They need to hire me for marketing.
They need to hire me for marketing, because I would not under any capacity be that fucking stupid to put together a card that, man.
Yeah, you can't shame
them. They literally shot themselves in the foot.
You can't shame people into voting.
Yeah, they rated you on your grade, basically shamed you into voting. But I mean, like, literally, that was the strategy in Youngkin. When all they could say is, this is what we want to do. This is what our vision of Virginia is. Or, you know what? This is what we've been doing the last 2 years, and this is what we're going to continue to do. Something, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know who. I really think these people have not learned anything since 2016, and they just been winning because people didn't like Trump. Literally.
Well, see, that's the thing. You said the magic number. Andrea, listen to the number you said. 2016. After 2016, people got politically active. Before that, they didn't give a damn about politics. And all of a sudden, everybody's a strategist. Everybody knows about politics. Everybody knows about parties. But I'm going to tell you this. This is the craziest thing. We were talking about millennials, right? Mm-hmm. So I live in a house full of millennials. I have 6 daughters. And I listen to them talk. And, in Virginia, we are not a purple state. This is seriously not a purple state. It's not even blue. It is such a weird color, because you have your pockets of blue and then all this red. Well, the problem with all the red is there's misguided information, and then with the blue is misguided information. And what's left is all of y'all. It's like the DPVA has gotten it so wrong that they are so behind in the times that they think that they know all. I'm gonna wait a minute. I don't know how many of y'all go to the quarterly meetings. Back in 2000, I think it was 18. There was a literal fight almost started at the quarterly meeting over rural communities getting any kind of benefit or going to the national convention. Y'all remember that? I was there, and they pulled me in to speak. Our party is the Democratic Party is lost. It has to be fixed. And I'm going to tell you what the solution is: ranked choice voting, period. Let's get rid of the two-party system, ranked choice voting, fix this the right way.
I want to throw up
That's
another
it.
graphic from, it's out of state, but the principle is still here. Sherrod Brown is the only Democrat to win statewide in Ohio in many years. Below is the 2018 victory map. He wins by doing less badly in the red compared to other Dems. I recently asked Brown how he goes about and does that, and he has a fascinating explanation. He goes and talks to the voters. So is there like a seeming unwillingness for state down Democrats to even want to reach out in places that aren't already blue on that map?
Yes.
It depends on who the candidate is, because, like I said earlier, and I'm not saying that Ralph Northam is a bad dude, but I voted for Tom. In fact, I worked for Tom's campaign. Like, I was on staff for Tom Perriello's campaign. And I'm one of those individuals that I believe in supporting candidates that, regardless of where their position is, that they're willing to speak to you and they're genuine about who they are. And, they don't try to bust past you with a bullshit poker face.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom, to me, was the better choice. And when, the whole blackface thing happened with Northam, I was the first one that put on my Facebook page, "Don't look at me, I voted for the other guy."
Hey, look, I'm still on his shit list on this wall, so I blasted him way out the water, and I was on the ticket. So,
and let's not
but
forget.
you know what? Go ahead.
Let's not forget that there was also a picture of him dressed in 1800 slave master garb as well. So he has a history of this. That's why I said he like they may be portraying him as some good guy because he as a doctor that cares for black kids, and I'm like, nah, he's undercover white supremacist in my opinion.
But this is the thing. When that whole blackface thing hit the national news, the Democratic Party of Virginia made a decision, and the Virginia Black Legislative Caucus made a decision. They made a decision. Look, we can play this up to our advantage and get the things that it is that we want out of the Northam administration if we choose not to ask for his resignation. And that's what happened. Because if you look at what happened after that occurred, you notice that Monument Row started coming down, and all of these other different things that are considered more progressive and more about women's reproductive rights and more about race relations and implicit bias, and Juneteenth became a state holiday.
But they also buried the black lieutenant governor
because they had Ralph Northam by the short and curlies. And the thing is that at first the Virginia Black Legislative Caucus was ready to throw Ralph under the bus in order to get Justin Fairfax into the governor's mansion.
Terry wanted them to resign.
When the whole, George Floyd equivalent sexual assault allegations. I'm sorry. I will never forgive him for making that statement in a debate. You know, he pretty much so shot himself in the ass. And, you know, the DPVA and all of the different groups of individuals that have formulated themselves as elected officials of color basically set Ralph up to do whatever it is they wanted, or they were going to, you know, make it quite clear that, you know, they are voicing their dissent. And I'm not saying, you know, I'm saying that as a theory, but it's a damn strong one.
I want to move to a topic regarding basically the turnaround of the white vote. Here's my little prepared question on that. Langston Hughes wrote the following, and Nina Simone put it to music, that when I try to find a job and earn a little cash, all you got to offer is a white backlash. Biden lost rural Virginia by 6 points. McAuliffe lost it by 27. There was also the white lash, where Youngkin won 2 out of 3 white men, outperforming Donald Trump. White women shifted 2, and I have some picks here to break that down, if I can get that here real quick. How white women helped propel Republicans to victory in Virginia. We got every race is different, each is unique. Candidates matter, but in a negative 14 margin with white women translate nationwide, Dems are in for a world of pain. Here's a little bit of breakdown on that. In 2020, white women went 50% for Biden and 49% for Trump. In 21, it was 57% Youngkin, 43% McAuliffe, a 15-point swing. To follow more on that, there's also commentary on how the establishment white Democrats sort of view the party itself. I have a little collage here of quotes on that matter. Had about instead of whining about Manchin, you helped Senate, blah, 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 here. I don't know if you guys can see a lot of the words there, but basically they're saying that it was a little bit too woke and too progressive of a message. We even had some trying to say that only if McClellan could demonstrate that she's moderate, progressives here don't want statewide facts. I also want to throw up here this picture from
Hey,
Jamal
Conrad,
Hill.
this is Conrad. You just pointed something out. That's something that we got to remember. This state is not a progressive state. So no matter how progressive you want a candidate to be, if your candidate is too progressive, they're going to lose the moderate vote.
But the key is losing the Democrat vote.
Yeah, but you know, there's a happy balance to that. It's called being fair and running on an honest ticket. The problem with the progressive ticket in Virginia is you can't make those promises in Virginia because you can't keep them in Virginia. And now you really can't. So I always tell candidates when I'm talking to them, you're going to run because you're running for the people. You're going to speak to the people. Don't worry about party. Don't worry about progressive, socialists, all of that. Forget that. You have to talk to people where they are. And in the first district of Virginia, you have all 3 levels of people. Okay? I've seen it from a federal level. As much as I believe I'm pro-choice, I believe in reorganizing our government so it's for the people, by the people, because we the people need them. But we have to be realistic. And this is the problem, and I'm going to be very blunt. When I speak to Black voters, it's, oh, I want to defund the police. That's not realistic in politics. That's realistic in your mind that you think is going to happen. But if I don't win that vote to get to that seat and get to the table so that we all can eat, it's all for nothing. Somebody actually just pointed this out about a week or two ago. She said, you're more of a liberal, a libertarian. You are not really a Democrat. And I said, no, I'm an independent who had to run as a Democrat because the Republican Party was too damn screwed up. And the Democratic Party was going to run against me on the ticket. I had no choice but to run as a Democrat. And if anybody asked me today, hey, Conrad, you knew. When people asked me what party they represent, I went to the American Party. Because in this country, we're too divided. And until we stop this division, we're going to keep losing elections like this. And running against a guy who isn't in office is exactly what I'm talking about. They ran against Trump. And what the young can do, he ran them against something that we brought up first. We brought that up first.
I have definitely.
What else?
That those collages are the biggest giant heaps of bullshit that I have ever seen. Like, can anybody tell me what specific policy that Terry McAuliffe endorsed that actually made him look radical left? Terry McAuliffe is far from the left as one could be. He is literally a right center Democrat. He's a right center Democrat. He is far left, far from the left as freaking possible. And I say that as a leftist. My whole thing is they often throw out those trumps. I mean those narratives. They often throw those out at the end of the election just to blame people who vote who have left-leaning viewpoints in order to discourage and suppress left-leaning viewpoints. Because the reality is, stuff like defunding the police, that's actually a realistic idea. Because what people are talking about when they say defund the police, they're talking about taking out these military surplus weapons that these police departments have and preventing them from purchasing and acquiring any more of them or any of the, all that. Like, what police force needs tanks and water cannon and live ammunition and stuff like that? That's
but
what,
is
that's
it a
what
realistic
defund the
thing
police
to run
means.
I believe
Is it a
That's what
realistic thing to run on in Virginia?
I believe it can be. It can be a realistic thing to run on anywhere. It all depends on what the people want. If the community is asking for them to stop, because it's not just a black thing. This is something that affects everybody. There's libertarians who are like, I'm tired of the police getting all this military budget spying on me and abusing me. So this is a topic of this is a constitutional right. This is freedom that everybody.
But is it enough votes in Virginia to win that argument?
Yes,
and that's
if you
what
actually
this is
get
all about.
people.
We didn't win on it.
Because he didn't run on it. Number one, he didn't run on it.
We didn't win.
He didn't run on it.
We didn't win on it.
The polls
We didn't
came
win
back.
on it
The
because
polls
we
came
didn't make
back.
the case correctly for it. That's why we lost.
But this is the one thing. When you're running for office, you do polls, and the polls came back that was a losing argument.
Well, the polls
and
also came back that people want health.
It was a losing argument because of how it was reported.
Guys, I want Ms. Jackson to speak. She's had her fingers up the longest.
Then what I have to say is like going back to what you're saying is that I've seen Youngkin in person, and he ran on a fictional candidate against. He was like saying that Terry McCullough was X, Y, and Z, which, like, you were saying, he's just not that. He's a very, very like moderate, like very unpopular, views from people who are actually liberal or progressive that just do not like what he stood for. But you know what I mean? Like, the thing is literally like, this is an issue. Like you say, you can debate on policies. This is a nuance. Like you say, I support defund the police, but that's because I've learned about it and I know about it and I can articulate it. And I think anybody can articulate it. And it's about, putting funds, to like de-escalate situations or fundings from police. And that's not to say that I don't think that police need funding, but just like you say, demilitarizing it, not making it them against us, and being in support of community policing. And I think that is that's Democrats being lazy, to be honest.
Yep, it's all about the word. It's the word. That word infuriates a whole community that came out to vote just because when defund the police was not even an issue, they changed it to CRT. And guess what? And honestly, this would not even be a discussion if we go back to the main point. Terry should never have been on the ticket.
True.
Period.
I definitely get it. My thing is this. It's not necessarily the fact that you could say it was Democrats being lazy, but it's definitely an issue of media misreporting about stuff like defunding the police, because they've been able to taint the narrative and therefore delegitimize defund the police. But when you actually have one-on-one conversations with Republicans, libertarians, what have you, they understand. They get the point. They're against this civil asset forfeiture. They're against police brutality, because they know that if it happens to a leftist, it can happen to them. They get it. The problem is again, the media has been able to taint the narrative and twist the narrative as such to make it look divisive. Another point that I wanted to make, the main reason why people don't like the phrase defund the police is because they've seen the impact of what other defund movements have done. Defund the post office, defund the schools, defund public housing, defund public transit and stuff like that. They have seen what defunding does, and they don't want that happening to the very institution that is entrusted to protect their interests, which is the police. The police are mainly there to protect their property. Their property, and that is it. They don't want to defund that because they feel like they will be losing. But they don't mind defunding anything else, though. They don't mind defunding, like I said, schools, the post office, public transit, public housing, road infrastructure, and all that stuff. They don't mind defunding that, but they will have. But the moment you say defund the police, and then they're looking at you like, "What the fuck are you talking about, huh? Who the fuck is you to say defund the police, motherfucker?" And they get pissed off by that. And that's, like I said, the media misreporting on what the actual intent of defund the police movements are has led to that delegitimization. And so now we're basically, trying to re-legitimize the defund the police movement.
Yep, we should have said demilitarize. We should have said I saw a bumper sticker that said refund the police and defund stupidity. And I was like, what? It's kind of a good bumper sticker because it caught my eye, but it made sense. And my 15-year-old now, when you ask her what does defund the police mean, she says take all the money from the police. Do you know that is what the message was to the Republican Party and to all those leaning that way? What I keep saying, words matter in campaigns, period. Terry didn't have the right words. Youngkin unfortunately picked the right words to motivate, elevate, although it was the biggest hypocrisy of the use of CRT. And when you argue, I argued so many times, it's not even taught in our schools that I was at the polls arguing with people. The thing is, no, Democrats weren't lazy. A lot of people said, you know what, I'm not voting for the other guy, and I'm definitely not voting for Terry. And then a lot of people just said, I'm out.
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, when I'm saying lazy, I'm saying about actually learning about
that I agree
not
with.
having like catchphrases. You know what I'm saying? Because let's be honest, and the man who left was saying is that Democrats have to campaign and do more, because literally Youngkin won on a non-existent issue on, racial bias. And we have to realize that, this says a lot more about our state, both the Republican and the Democrat, because we have racial issues, just period. And it's simple fact that we're not addressing that, that is an issue, because literally that's how, Youngkin won, and, how could Terry really, as a white male who has his own racial issues from the past, really have been a force to fight against that? This is another white man who is also has racial issues. So how am I going to these are just two white men who are, rich, how are they really that much different? Except for one has a D and one has an R behind it. And at the end of the day, that was the issue, that there was no really distinction. And then Terry really has some baggage. And then at the end of the day, he wanted black women, the whole nation wanted black women to save the day. And we was like, no, Because like at the end of the day, like what you were saying is that sometimes you have to take back your power. I don't want to be used for my vote. If you want my vote, you have to do things that I want. That's how you use leverage. Every other, you know what I mean, demographic is getting what they want for their vote, except for us as Black people. And like you say, it's, you know, predicated on the past or civil rights or that. That's great, but like you said, Black people aren't a monolith. You know what? We started voting as Republicans, and we're very heavily Republican because, you know, the Civil War and slavery and, you know, those rights. But then, you know, FDR came with the New Deal, and some Democrats, you know, voted for him. But then civil rights, you know, Johnson was not like a very like, you know, he used the N-word. He was not about, you know what I mean? Like he was a racist probably, but he saw that he needed those Black votes to stay in power. So, you know, he traded off and supported civil rights. And, you know, that's how these things work. And you know what? Like literally, I think if, you know, Republicans did better except having to be, you know what I mean? Like literally their focus is the Southern strategy. Their whole strategy is being racist. So how
That
can
part.
They
we
haven't changed
as
it.
the people really
changed it.
be like go with the Republicans? So then literally it's a lesser of two evils. And I think a lot of people, I'm tired of voting for the lesser of two evils. I would, you know, like
Ranked choice voting.
yeah,
Ranked choice voting.
Agreed.
At this point, it was like a hard head makes a soft butt. I bet you next time you might, you know, go with one of these Black women, and you know, maybe, you know what I'm saying? Like we have an issue. You know, there is a lot of issues, and like you said, there's a lot of issues with race. There's a lot of issues with location, and you know, DPVA has been, you know, focusing on cities for the last 10 years, and it's worked. But this has always been short. It's been a short-term strategy, and as eventually it was gonna like play out, because if you focus in the cities, like eventually, if you don't turn out the vote, you're not going to win, and that's what happened. But if you
Right.
invested in every county and every committee, then eventually, like those, hey, my country vote counts just as much as those city people. Every
Thank
vote
you.
counts.
That's it. But that's the
Well,
thing.
I
The
would
DPA
slightly,
looks at
I
our votes
slightly,
as half votes.
I would slightly disagree with that assertion. What the DPVA has been doing is squarely focusing on Northern Virginia because of the population growth in Northern Virginia. That's where the majority of the Democrat Party's voters have been coming from. In Northern Virginia, they are losing voters everywhere else in other Democratic strongholds across the state. Richmond, the city of Richmond, the 7 cities in the Tidewater, Roanoke, all the major Democratic strongholds, the Democratic Party is bleeding voters, but they're getting them in Northern Virginia, and that's where their focus has been, and addressing their concerns specifically, which leads me to make this point. We need to stop supporting candidates that are in that reside and represent Northern Virginia districts, because they only when I'm talking about for governor, lieutenant governor, whatnot, because they are only going to get into office and do things for Northern Virginia, for the Northern Virginia area, while the rest of Virginia suffers. That is one thing I have seen in both of those areas.
I would say this, and I don't know if it was just me, but you're spot on. When Terry was talking on stage, he did not talk to the rest of Virginia. He was talking to Fairfax County, and specifically white women in Fairfax County. That's who he was talking to. He was not talking to anybody else. Particularly, like, there was a strike here for the city workers in Norfolk, and you can't say you're for changing right to work when the people of the city are trying to unionize. Who are you looking at? Who are you talking to? And
that right there.
And you are so right, Andrea. The Republicans have not changed their strategy since 1974. It's been the Southern strategy after the Southern strategy after the Southern strategy. They just changed the buzzwords. So what point are we as a collective in Democrat, or you progressive, wherever, are you going to understand a hard hit and make a soft ass? When are you going to understand this is what they do? This is their policy. They organize against culture war policies and mythical evil people who are coming to get you and take care of you and kill your kids, and they just make you be afraid. You're supposed to dead this issue from the beginning. CRT should have never, ever became what it was. They should have deaded it from the beginning and basically be like, okay, do you want a CRT is? Explain it to me. What is it?
I said that a couple of times.
What is it? How do you do it? How is it being taught?
About CRT, I did the exact same thing.
Where?
Define it.
Define it.
Define it.
And not what Fox News told you. Look it up. Define it from what it is. Not what Fox News told you.
But I do want to provide this caveat. We have been talking about the two Jennifers. Just understand that one of the Jennifers would not have been a candidate if we were not supporting Northern Virginia candidates.
That is true, but the whole point is, like I said, we do need to stop that trend, because that seems that's where all the candidates for governor and lieutenant governor have been coming from in recent years. We need to stop that trend. We need to start supporting candidates that live further south of that region, so that way there can be some more equal representation and therefore equal distribution of resources. That's the point that I was getting at, because whenever they get into power, they direct resources upward to the Northern Virginia region, while everybody else. And a prime example of this, I'm a bus operator. I work for Dash in Alexandria. Okay, you go up in Northern Virginia, you see world-class transit systems with reliable on-time schedules and all that. You go further south, Richmond, there's a lack of service. 7 cities. They got Hampton Road Transit. Lack of service.
There's
they don't even have service beyond 8 p.m.
That was your campaign that you were running on, Ms. Frangie, was improving
there was no
transportation in that area.
in the Northern Neck, Middle Peninsula, James City, nowhere. There is no transportation in the 1st District of Virginia, which is the 1st district of the country.
Exactly.
None.
And that's what I'm getting at, is that when you get these people when you elect these people to the high offices that reside in Northern Virginia, that's a prime example of how the resources are distributed to the Northern Virginia region and not further south where they're sorely needed.
Now, I actually had a prepared question that sort of followed up on this topic. Here it is. The Beach Brothers show is from Hampton Roads. What about the voting battle over Hampton Roads? Youngkin and Sears and Miaris all have deep 757 ties. Bob McDonald, Virginia Beach. Ralph Northam is from Eastern Virginia. Would have someone on the ticket boosted Hampton Roads turnout if they were from Hampton Roads, like Jay Jones over Herring? Would it have brought more people out for Nancy Guy, Alex Askew, and Mogler if we had someone from Hampton Roads representing the top of the ticket?
I would say it all depends on what they were for. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter where you come from in the state. What are you going to do for the citizens of this state?
But
how are you going to make it different?
But that's not how this works, though. The fact of the matter is when you have a candidate who has deep ties to a specific area, the constituents of that area, whatever side they reside on, whether that individual is a Dem candidate or whether they are a Republican candidate, they support whoever's homegrown, because Youngkin is a Scott Ridgel parrot. And that's one of the things that I'm pretty positive, motivated Virginia Beach to come out as hard as it did, motivated those cities that are not Hampton, Newport News, Portsmouth, and Norfolk to come out, because Youngkin is a Scott Ridgel parrot. And, you look at that, if we go back to the last election cycle, record voting and Dem strongholds for Ralph Northam, because he has ties to this community, especially in Norfolk. So it's like when you have, even though it shouldn't be that way, and it should, voting in general should be based on what you stand for, local people who have local ties are going to garner that local support. And, it's the same, it's almost as ridiculous as the concept of the more attractive candidate is the one who wins for president. It's stupid. But is it or is it not true?
I just wanted to touch on one previous point that Andrea made about the Southern strategy, because this goes back to the failure of the Democrat Party. Democrat Party, all this time while the Republicans were talking about the Southern strategy, they should have been focusing, or the Democrats should have been focusing on the economics. Because one of the things I noticed about the Youngkin campaign, one of the campaign ads they made stated specifically that his election would lead to the end of the grocery tax. And that is one of the things that resonated with people. Again, that's an economic issue that directly affects people, specifically directly affects their economics. So that's one of the things that the Democrats, in my opinion, need to also focus on in the future is the economics. Making that connection to the kitchen table about what's coming into their pockets.
Ms. Jackson.
I agree with that, but then I also agree with, I don't think Democrats have a long historically calls out. I think somebody else said that Republicans lies and BS. So I would have just been like, hey dog, so this is just sort of no new car taxes, you know what I mean? I was in high school in the 90s, it was Gilmore, you know what I mean? Do we still pay personal property taxes on our cars? Yeah. So I mean, they reduced it. So it's one of those things of Republicans has no ethics. They will lie, steal, cheat, you know what I mean? They will use a non-existent CRT is just not, a non-existent issue. I mean, they don't have any morals and values. They will just lie, And so I think that Democrats still have their kid gloves on, you know what I mean? Regardless, I think Democrats have better ideas, but they're just not as good as politicians as Republicans. They're ruthless.
Yeah,
I would say the
I
same
would
thing.
I would disagree with that only because
I'm
only saying that.
One at a time.
I'm only saying that to say this. I'm only saying that to say this. You say that about the Republicans. Yes, that is true. I would also say that the Democrats don't have any morals or values, that they are just, both of those parties are amoral.
Both parties are politicians. They are
amoral.
They're both bought and paid for. They're both. Think about it. Like the Carlyle Group. Youngkin worked for a company that has one of the worst reputations since the East India Company, and nobody can do anything. Terry McAuliffe never mentioned it because he has stock in that company. He has money in that company. So they're both bought and paid for by the same businesses, the same operations. That's why they've used these culture war things to distract you, because neither one of them are really going to do the things they said if it means they're going to lose out on their donors. That's who they care about.
Because,
they care about their donors.
Honestly, let's talk about that. We're talking about economics, right? Mm-hmm. So Glenn Youngkin, his large election push statements as it got time to vote were two things. Were several things, but two that pop in my mind. The first one was geared towards rural white Virginians, and that was the grocery tax. The second one was geared towards white suburbia, and that was that I'm going to invest all of this money in education and blah, blah, blah. And watch, neither one is going to happen. And I'm willing to put money on that.
He won't.
Agreed.
I want to touch on something that was brought forth by a former delegate now, but also a progressive former Democrat who responded to this particular tweet with something above it. Here it is. First, Jennifer Adeli. So let's get this straight right now, even though it's probably too late. The Democratic Party slash moderate slash establishment primary and kicked out House delegate progressives and ran against qualified progressive people of color for governor and lieutenant governor. Tonight is not on progressives. They had already been alienated, to which Delegate Samira said, keep saying Dems in Virginia needed more suburban white women votes and keep brushing off the biggest reason we lost was that the working class black and brown people, a critical part of 2020 voting bloc and 46 one with, are exhausted and centrist establishment Dems don't care. So it's like, how do you fine tune that messaging to actually be more economically populist and win on it? Because Banji did make a point about winning, but you're not also going to win if by not touching on those issues, you alienate the base.
I'll be honest. Here in the valley, I mean, like, it seems like it's a sort of a subject, but this is very apparent here, and that's why I want to leave. You know what I mean, like, and just leave Virginia in general because, like, clearly, like, these people want it to be the party of white liberals, and it's just not. I mean, like, what, like, Democrats have not carried white men since the 60s. I mean, like, it's just sort of like you have to win with who you have, not who you want. And I just feel like, bro, like these white women they ain't loyal. You know what I'm saying? They will switch up right quick. So I just feel like you need to be focusing and get out the people who is gonna vote for you. And at this point, it's like people of color. You know what I mean? Like literally, it's black women. So you really need to cater to that your base. And I don't. At this
Hey, Andrea.
What?
Hey, Andrea. You know something that I've said this to Conrad. Do you know where I suffered the most racism? Where in all of my political realms? Democratic Party. White liberals treated me worse than very conservative Tea Party Republicans. And, you know, I can say from a candidate who I had Trump supporters supporting me, which is me. Didn't get started with that. But I was thoroughly bothered that as a black woman, I was called well spoken. I was told I was pretty for a black woman. I was smart for a black woman. Conrad, how many of them did I have? We had a whole show on them one time. I had heard every, oh my gosh. Are your parents really educated? Or are your children by the same father? That all came from the Democratic Party.
And those people can catch hands from a black woman. How about that?
Oh no. You know what was shocking? Ryan Sawyer came to my defense. Of all people, Ryan Sawyer. And then suddenly I noticed that it was more so I want to call them my hippie followers who started defending me. And my Trump supporters started following and protecting me. That says a lot about our party in general. We have a broken system. And at this point, and the other day I was talking to someone and I was venting the same way. And they said, quote, what the hell are you going to do about it? You ran for Congress to make a difference. Are you going to run for the DPVA? I don't even know how to run for the DPVA. I don't even know if I can run for the DPVA. But I'm going to tell you something. I'm tired of us as a people, period, no color involved, being treated as second-class citizens when it comes to politics, when it comes to money. My money is just as green as anyone else's money. And I firmly believe we got to change Virginia politics if we're going to change the rest of this country. Now, I got to go vote before my team kills me.
Well, I would say this, though. I know a lot of people say that the system is broken. I don't think that it is. I think it operates exactly the way they designed it to operate. And that we have to come to that realization that, like you said, white liberals is who they cater for, even though the black vote primarily Black female vote is what gets in the elections. If they know this and they use us as a safety net, then how about we just remove that safety net and go someplace else where we appreciate it and understand that they don't want us to be able to do. They just want us to save their butts. They don't want us to actually do anything that's going to protect and actually improve our lives because they can't use us as safety nets and scapegoats at the same time. You can't have it both ways. So at some point, we're just going to have to just, all right, you get what you asked for. This is the system that you want. You can have that system. I'll do my own system. We don't have to deal with them anymore. It'll be harder. I'm not going to say it'll be harder to have to do third party. It'll be extremely harder in this climate, and definitely extremely harder in a way that the system is designed up to be. But what are the other options? Because going into the system again, that's not broken, that's operating the way it's supposed to operate, and keep getting the same result. That's the one. That's a start. I say we leave we go third party. I say we vote third party as much as we possibly can with independent.
You know what?
And
hey, Andrea, I was going to run as an independent for Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you how many ways I was told no.
I mean, yeah, I know it's hard. I know it's difficult.
So I ran against my own cousin, who's a Republican, for the first district. And when people realized that we were cousins running against each other, a Black woman and a white man running against each other, Republican and Democrat, we made history on 4 levels. This is what I was told. If you run as an independent, we would destroy you. And they would. They would ruin my career. I'm a federal contractor. I'm a real estate agent. I'm a contracting company. They would have changed my life dramatically, and I would not have had any backing. At least by picking one of the parties, I had the local backing. I didn't have the state backing. But when it came down to the 21 Democratic committees, I had their support.
And that's how they keep you where you are. That's how they keep you where you are, keep you subservient, keep you desperate. Because if you leave, and you need that infrastructure, you need that power to protect you. Now, there is the People's Party of Virginia that's kind of doing some things in the Green Party, but they need that infrastructure. And if you're afraid to leave with all your talent and all your resources and go someplace else, then they can keep you where you want you, right where they want you, small. Keep you small, because if you go someplace else, you'll be big. And that's how they do it. We have to figure that's how.
And
they do
that's why I said,
exactly.
When I started speaking out against them after Tuesday, so Wednesday I went on my tirade. I was like, you know what? I don't give a shit if I ever run for Congress or government again. At this point, I am so sick of people who think they know what's best for everyone else stepping up there and telling us what we should want. Mm-hmm. And it starts at local levels. We got to change it. We got to have a cohort of great candidates, which we don't. We keep getting these one-offs. We're never going to win any damn thing in this state. I mean, it doesn't matter what party you are.
I would definitely say this. So I remember former Richmond City Council person Chuck Richardson once said at a Richmond Crusade for Voters meeting a few years ago, the Democrat Party is like a drunk father that beats the mother and nobody wants to stand up and say anything about it. And that is exactly how the Democrat Party operates. And now personally, I have always, the 2 times I ran for public office in 2016 for Richmond City Council, in 2017 for House of Delegates, I did not run with backing of the Democrat Party. I've always maintained my independence. I ran as a Green Party candidate for the House of Delegates. But the thing is this: if you run outside the party, if you're the next door neighbor that can look inside the house and see that drunk father beating on that family, and you go over next door and say something about it, the Democrat Party will be be ready to call the cops on you. That's how they act. That's how they act. That you're like you running outside the Democrat Party or the Republican Party is literally going over to that person's house and being like, "Yo, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you hitting on your family like that? I'm not going to tolerate that. You know what I'm saying? Go ahead and hit me." And then all of a sudden, instead of that, they be like, "Well, I'm gonna just call the cops on you. Oh, and you a black dude too, so yeah, I'm gonna make sure you die." That's how they operate. And it sucks that I have to use that analogy, but that's the reality of it. That's what people have to understand. Because the Democrats are really not the Democrats or the Republicans. Both of them are con artists. They're not there to look out for your interests or for the collective interests of the people. They are like has been mentioned throughout this conversation tonight. They are only concerned about enriching their donors and expanding power and wealth where they deem appropriate. They are not looking out for us. And if you dare question it, then they will try to beat you back. Prime example of this. Look what happened to Jill Stein in 2016. How they tried to call her a Russian bot. How they tried to blame her for the loss of Hillary Clinton's loss, even if you took all of Jill Stein's votes and gave them to Hillary Clinton, she would have still lost against Trump. And even though Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, got more votes than Jill Stein did. And like I say, it goes back to media risk reporting and suppression of candidates that run from outside the mainstream, because they will always do that. They would use the media apparatus to suppress candidates that raise critical questions about the way our governments are operating, whether are they operating in their interest or not. Okay. And another prime example: look at the legislation. Look at all the laws that literally protect Democrats and Republicans from having to actually face your Greens and Libertarians, for example, on debate stages, like the Presidential Debate Commission, for example. The Democrat and Republican parties control that commission. So obviously, all the other political parties, they're going to get shut out. Other states have implemented laws which say that any political party other than the Republicans and Democrats, they have to amass a certain vote percentage or a certain amount of donations raised before they can get on the ballots. So they've been actively suppressing other political parties that may, that could go challenge them and put them in check and force them to actually do some work.
Let's understand that the parties in the primaries, that yes, I agree with you. When it comes towards debates and things of that nature, it depends on percentages and donations raised and things of that nature. But the numbers that start in the beginning are not anywhere close to the numbers that they are at the end. And that's the reason why you have this ridiculously big stage in the beginning of the primaries versus towards the end before a candidate is declared for each party. So, and I'm not saying that money and donors and percentages and all of that should be restrict the ability for candidates to be able to participate in debates. I'm not saying that, but I do understand some of the logic, and that's just a side of me that's just purely analytical, because it's basically just presenting candidates that have a chance of being able to secure enough enough delegates.
My whole thing is how they're going to even have that chance when you undercut them from the start.
And we know that system doesn't work. Look at
Bernie.
We know that doesn't work. Look what happened with Bernie. They undercut him from the beginning too. I think the system initially was designed to try to be better, but it became so corrupted that it's no longer doing what it's supposed to do. It's keeping qualified individuals from being able to actually do something productive for their communities, and they're doing it because of nepotism and who and how you can get and the donor class. And if the system is operating the way it's supposed to, and they're not willing to actually do anything to change it because it's too lucrative for them, what other options do we have? Either we stay in the same vicious cycle and not get anything, or we pack our bags and we leave. Those are options.
Strike.
Yeah.
Or go on strike.
What
When
you
we
just
were
said.
Virginia is clearly us going on strike. This was us going on strike, and their solutions to it was progressives and blaming the Republicans for doing the same thing they've done for 35 years. They take no accountability. So it's what other options? How are we going to change this? Because it's not working.
We like I said, general strike. They're not going to, as
That's
Malcolm
true.
X said, you must speak to the government in the language they understand. When you start withholding your labor, and as such, your dollars from that government, they will have no choice but to listen to you, because that is their source of revenue, their source of income, and ultimately their source of control is through the collective labor, the collective result of our labor, and an upward transfer of wealth. If we withhold that from them, they have no power.
There is supposed to be
That's why
general
we
strike
say
coming
general
up
strike.
this week. The only thing that I can think of is just a lot of families who have kids who are broke now because of coronavirus and COVID, who went through their savings and can't afford to miss a day. That's how you keep people subservient. And
Exactly.
keep them so desperate that they only option is what you give them. If you have the opportunity to do so, I would say go do it. But if you don't, people understand. But you're right. The most important color in America is green. Let's never forget that.
100%. I just wanted to say is that I think, like you said, there's two options. Like some people just don't want to leave, you know what I mean, the party. And I say more power to you to try to run and to get into the inner circles. But I've been on and off since 2012, and I was like, I've been preaching the same thing, and they don't want to listen. You know what I mean? And like sometimes it's like, why I gotta keep arguing or fighting when people who's supposed to be your allies, you need my vote. Like I'm doing the labor. I'm giving you my free labor and my votes to keep you in power for you to abuse me. No, and I find that like the argument with what they're saying is true. In Europe they have multiple parties, and I was like, we continue to get the bare minimum because it's the lesser of two evils. The Democrats and Republicans are two sides of the same coin, and until we as a people say, we don't want this, I want representation that's actually going to represent me, we're not going to get it. I mean, like, I don't see it. I don't see the Democrats doing any better, like nationally, state. I don't see it. They don't have it in them.
That's why pushing out.
It goes back to that
qualified.
analogy. It goes back to that analogy I made earlier about the abusive father beating on the family. That's exactly what it goes back to. And most people wind up staying in the Democrat Party because they feel like they have no other choice to go. But then, like I said, you got that next door neighbor that's willing to go knock on that door and say something and get that family up out of there and perhaps beat the shit out of that drunk father. You know what I'm saying? Take it.
All right. Now, we have touched on how alienating it was to have such qualified candidates in the primary pushed out by someone like Terry. I want to follow that in how, from that point where he won the primary to election day, his campaign was absolute garbage. And here it is. There was talk of a coordinated campaign, pairing Herring and Hala and Terry together and all working with down ballot races. But the timing wasn't right on that. And I don't know if anything actually was positive from that. I'm going to throw up together a picture from where did it go? Right about here, from Mr. Carpenter, good friend of mine on Facebook. Because up until the election day, people were still believing that Youngkin was still going to lose by like 8 to 9 points. Like you just assumed that the vote totals are going to carry year to year. It's like laughing my ass off from Terry, who won the last time by like 1% in perfect conditions and an unpopular Trump north of 1 by 9. That's not happening in this race. Best case scenario is McAuliffe by like 3. Again, we'll always think that because there are more Dems that we automatically win. Turnout wins elections, not stats. It's very possible the Dems could lose the House and the governorship if we don't step the game up. Coordinated campaign is nowhere to be found. No yard signs. His campaign is lacking the volunteer army, etc. There's more on that I'll get to in a second. Personal anecdotes like Chuck Rocha, a Latino political strategist who helped Bernie in Virginia, said the Latino operatives reached out to the state party and the McAuliffe campaign immediately after the primary to offer our assistance, but no calls were returned. We know that without a Black woman or someone on top of the ticket to motivate our base, that there needed to be an investment in the Latino community, and our advice fell on deaf ears. And I also want to call on Caitlin Bennett of the Fredericksburg Democratic Committee, who called this the worst campaign she's ever been involved with, that this campaign was a head scratcher from the beginning. There was a lack of communication with the Democratic Party of Virginia, a lack of communication with individual campaigns, and chairs that seemed to be on a last to know basis. The campaign itself contributed a lot to his loss. And would anyone disagree?
No.
No.
Don't y'all find it ironic that I'm sitting here eating popcorn?
No.
I'm about to be eating a fried chicken dinner in a short bit, so I'm
No.
with you. I understand.
That was right on point, 100%.
I actually
He lost that election all on his own. He didn't
Yes, he
need
did.
help.
Like I was saying, you know, he was relying too much on the Northern Virginia vote. He was hoping that Black voters would come to his rescue and save him, even though he was even though he was running a crap campaign, and he was counting on people not having a memory and hoping that they could just run against Trump, who was no longer in power, and they wound up getting sunk. And quite frankly, I am glad that Terry McAuliffe lost, because now that may force the Democrat Party to do some real work and actually earn everyone's vote instead of thinking it's automatically entitled to them because of who they are.
You only learn through a loss.
Yep.
I don't know, but are they really going to look themselves in the mirror? Because then, like, did y'all see that? I think you read it at the beginning about, you know, why he think he lost. And I just feel like, no, because you didn't campaign, because instead of, I don't know, using your money to like buy and pay for field organizers because you knew you wasn't going to have volunteers because people don't like you. I mean, like, you spent all your money on dumb commercials and like flyers. Like, I just didn't get it. Like, where did the money go?
It went into their pocket.
In his pocket.
It went into their pocket. That's where it went. It went into their pocket.
Yeah, over 15 million of his raises went to staff and consultants.
But the point still stands, because he got them in his back pocket.
Yeah,
he got them in his back pocket.
And
so it's still going in his pocket. That money's going to circulate back around in terms of favors and all that stuff. It's going right back in his pocket. So yeah, Andrea's point still stands.
So wait a minute. Are you telling me that you say $15 million went to staff and strategists?
And these are the same people are going to go from campaign to campaign to candidate to candidate. And this is how they make their money. They give them bad strategy, crappy ideas, because they don't know how to talk to people. They don't interact with the actual public. They just go off of their polling. And then that's $15 million from donors went into to those pockets. That's where they went. And they're going to jump from campaign to campaign and make more money.
The source is VPAP. I looked in. He said the expenditures were his campaign and consultants.
And I want to make this anecdotal point. Okay, when I ran for the House of Delegates in 2017, I ran against Betsy Carr, Democrat, represents the 69th district. Okay, I believe she raised about $500,000 in that race. I only raised $2,000. And my libertarian opponent raised about maybe 11 grand. So basically, I was funding my own revolution. But the point that I wanted to make is that Betsy Carr raised that $500,000, and a good chunk of that money went to staffing and consultants. Mm-hmm. Again, that's how the money in the Democrat Party circulates around. So yeah, McAuliffe might be spending that money, but it's in the end going to come right back into his pocket. It's going to probably come back to his pocket about 4 more times before it actually leaves.
That's why they don't want to change the system, because it works very well for them.
Yeah.
Why change something that's not broken for you? It's broken for everybody else,
Mhm.
but you're getting rich off of it. Why change it?
Exactly.
And Virginia has bad campaign legislation or laws. Very terrible.
Yeah, very you can in Virginia you can raise unlimited amounts of money. You can raise unlimited amounts of money. And it does not matter what type of donors donate to you. You as long as you report it, it's okay. Let the people go ahead and look at your VPAP and ask any questions they have. But the reality is that, like I said earlier, we've seen how Dominion Energy and Verizon and all these other multinational corporations have been able to donate to these candidates, and then we wind up seeing subversive legislation that winds up hurting us in the long run. I remember a few years ago, they were trying to, they were out in Roanoke, they were trying to build their own municipal broadband internet access network. And then the General Assembly, thanks to Verizon and Comcast lobbying them and donating money to them, they passed legislation that wound up killing any attempts by local governments to devise their own internet access network.
I want to throw up a picture here actually from Miss Bennett, who again is the Democratic Committee chair from Fredericksburg. Her tweets that I'm about to share, I guess, were either that night or the next day, where she was living in the moment of her stream of consciousness regarding the loss. And here we go. I'm hearing that we need more rural voices and we need more Black voices in leadership. I'll say what these folks have in common. Campaign in the hold on, the logo's in the way there. Campaign in the DPVA needs to appreciate, respect, and listen to local leaders and grassroots organizations. Also, we need to stop propping up mediocre, out of touch white male candidates with no vision for our party. And we need an overall, the Democratic Party of Virginia, with the focus on party building with a dedicated campaign organization on the ground year round. So, as we look going forward, because a lot of this is about the lessons in why he lost, but it's also lessons in how all of us together are going to try and put W's on the board in the future. How would we suggest the Democratic Party of Virginia operate? And anyone go in any order they want to.
Stop the first off, actually talk to people about economic issues, because when people understand that you're actually trying to fight for their best economic interest, they're more likely to support you. Stop taking Black voters for granted. Stop thinking that young voters are entitled to you. Actually, learn to embrace some of the radical socialist, progressive ideals of some of your forefathers in the past, like FDR, for example, because as everybody remembers, FDR once said that any business which depends for existence on paying its workers less than living wages has no right to continue in this country. And Democrats need to remember that and apply that lesson and make sure that people, and it goes back to the economic point, that people are able to earn enough to be able to afford a basic standard of living in Virginia at minimum. That's what I would say. And that's just a starting point. They got to do a lot more, a lot more.
Ms. Jackson and Ms. Nakia, I know you've worked with the party itself via locally or stately a lot longer than I have. I've been on this for about a year or two. I definitely want to keep going forward. But how would you two suggest the party itself, all the way down from your local committee to the state itself, go forward?
You want to go first? Or, I don't know. I think, to be honest,
party funded, either party funded membership or no fee membership, because you shouldn't have to pay to be an active voice in your local party.
I paid the Joint of Virginia Beach Committee.
Term limits on chairs or officers on the local level, as well as all the way up, that you can't be in a position for the rest of your damn life. Financial transparency. I mean, that's just a few. You know, at this point, the way that I feel about my local Democratic Party and the Democratic Party of Virginia, I'd be glad to include kiss my entire ass in that list of anybody who knows me outside of this platform understands where I'm at right now. I'm kind of jaded at politics in general.
Yeah. Now, Miss Jackson, I think that you might also share some of that.
Yeah, I would all of that.
You're like all of that.
Yeah, and
All of that.
I think I'm a little bit more jaded because I'm out. I like this was my second time trying to like give them a chance because I really, really wanted to see change and they don't want to change. And I'm like, if somebody doesn't want to change, I don't see change really happening, at least in my area, for the next 20 years. So, I mean, like, I've moved on, I've made peace with it, you know what I mean? And like, I want to, you know, move forward with something that, you know, I can actually do something and be listened. So I'm for like the Virginia People's Party, you know what I mean? And I, you know, joined their state central committee, and I want to see what that's about because to me, it felt liberating not to vote for Terry McAuliffe in the top of the ticket. I felt like my conscience was clear. You know what I'm saying? I voted for all of the other down ballot Democrats, but you know what I mean? Like, to me, it was just like, you didn't ask for my vote. You're not entitled to it. You didn't do a good job campaigning. All you had to do was come to my area. And if you wanted my vote, if you wanted to win, you know what I mean? Like, it just was too much entitlement. And the simple fact is, I think DPVA really needs to, like, all of the people sit down and talk to a Black woman. Literally, you know what I'm saying? Not like talk at her, not try to get her free label. Talk to her. Like, Black women are the backbone of the Democratic Party. And it's not, you know, respect it. You know what I mean? Like, literally, I just was flabbergasted. And Terry McAuliffe knew that that's how he won in 2013. And the way that he did the two Jennifers, you know what I mean? It just was like, I cannot honor that by giving you my vote. I can't, because, you know what I mean? You just respected him. You know, sometimes it's like, you could have threw your support behind one of those two women and then moved on. And you know what I mean? That's how things are. You've already been governor. You was an okay governor. And I wouldn't have had any problems with you. But like, it was just too much. It just was like, this is 2021. It's not 2013. In 2013, you was an okay candidate. In 2021, it doesn't fit the time. And I think that, you know, I honestly think that the Democratic Party as a whole needs to sit down and look at 2016 and 2021 because people are still mad about 2016. And I was like, that's 5 years ago. Why are you still in the past? Like, just like the Terry McAuliffe, like, you got to admit that Hillary Clinton ran a bad campaign. And I just be like, you know, it was very much the same. It's entitlement. And this is just me. The neoliberalism of the last 40 years needs to be cut out. Like he says, I was like, to be honest, I mean, like, the ideas that are progressive and radical aren't, you know what I'm saying? FDR, everybody up until 1980 has been for Medicare for all. Even Nancy Pelosi in the 90s was for Medicare for all. So this is just how much power corrupts. You know what I mean? I'm just like, power corrupts. That money, it corrupts. Nobody is indestructible. We're just human. And I think that, like you say, term limits just in general would help. But you know what I'm saying? Like, go back to like the basics, go back to FDR and, like, you know, the second Bill of Rights, you know what I mean? Where it is where you're getting a job that is paying, that it's like a right for, you know, to get housing, all of these things. These are the essentials that are going to motivate people. You know what I mean? Like the relics of the Clintons and like McCulloch, he's a Clintonite. And it's just not, that's not going to work anymore. Just like that was good for the last 40 years, but we need to put that in the past and move forward.
I would sum it up, I guess, by saying that the phrase vote blue no matter who needs to be retired because who is the most important thing.
I agree. I think we have to, there's no more voting just on party lines because
No.
as you said before, they're the two sides of the same coin. So we get the same thing regardless. If we keep getting told lesser to evil, we're still getting evil. So it doesn't really benefit. And particularly with I'm like you, I've moved on. I voted for Princess. I did vote down ballot. I did vote for Miss Sanders. But I'm no longer, if you don't earn my vote, you don't get my vote. And I don't care what party you're associated with. I'm here for about what you're going to do for me and my community. And if you're going to come up with some legit policy procedures and things that I agree with, then I'm here for you. You can get it. We also like the party, little tidbit for them. Stop being surprised about your opponent acting like your opponent. Like you should know these are going to be the strategies that they're going to be utilizing. Don't be shocked when racism comes up. Just come up with a rebuttal. But I echo everything, piggyback on everything you guys said, echo all of it. It's all good, but we'll see what happens. We'll learn. We'll see. I mean, there's going to be elections in Virginia from now to 2025. So we're going to see what happens with the party. If they decide to actually keep the people like both Andreas here who are like juices, or try to keep as many people as they can, if they can get to rejuvenate the votes, or it's going to be another bloodbath in 2022, and then we'll see what happens in 2024.
I mean, look at it this way, there are 5 people on the panel right now who are definitely engaged voters. They're not going to not show up. It's just whether or not that they put the tally in the D. They have to be worthy of the vote.
Exactly.
Now, I think with that, I think with that, I want to thank all the panelists for joining the show to discuss all this. And with all the who that's left, let's go around with a short sentence or two to just give our farewells and suggestions. Ms. Jackson, how would you like to close yourself out tonight?
I just like to think that, like you said, I think that we've all been engaged and volunteer and probably put blood, sweat, and tears. And I think that it's a wake up call when people like me and the other Andrea and people have just like are gone. You know what I'm saying? Like when you have your work base, like there should be alarm bells going on in the Democratic Party, because these are your base. You know what I mean? These are your go-tos, and like when we aren't, like our opinions aren't valued or our strategy isn't, you know what I'm saying, taken seriously, there's a problem, and there's a serious problem in DPVA on the Democratic Party as a whole.
Exactly. Mr. Monteague, if I'm pronouncing that right, I haven't been able to speak with you in person actually before. How would you like to send your message off for the evening?
Well, like I've been saying earlier, like people just need to realize the power of saying no. That's the strongest word in the English language, or the human language, is no, because that's your empowerment, and we should all exercise that. We need to stop, like has been said, we need to stop just willy-nilly giving our vote away to people that don't deserve it. We need to empower ourselves. We need to tell them no. And I personally would love it if we could just put on the beach ballot none of the above, legally binding, none of the above option, where if enough people vote for none of the above, then that seat remains vacant until the next election. And and the people that ran for that office are banned from running again. And I say that because if the people that ran for that office are so disgusting that that folks decide to vote for none of the above, then obviously the problem is with them, not with the people, and they should not be blamed.
Now, I would just suggest the lesson we learned from Boosters No-Ans is don't actually run on that as a person because you will actually win and they will vote for you. Now, Miss Nakia, I want to have your final thoughts on tonight. What should we think about going forward?
You know, and this is something that has been a large part of my thought process over for a while, but definitely over the last 24 hours. You should, when your politics outweighs your morals, there's a problem. When what you can gain from somebody is more important than what you can do for somebody, that's a problem. And for individuals who put themselves into elected office because of what they can gain versus who they can serve, you don't belong there. And I realize that that issue is not just a Republican problem, that it's all encompassing. And as a loyal Democrat to my core, when it comes towards especially my domestic policy, I am hurt because I'm the first one that will lay it on the line for progress. And we have moved into an echelon, especially in the Commonwealth, where it's not about what you do and who you help. It's about what you get and how you benefit off of the sweat of others' backs. And I hate how that feels. It's a heaviness that, like, I don't want to feel, but I do. Mm-hmm. And I want my politics, I want my values to match the party that I support. I want my work to support the things that I value, the things that I want for my children, the things that I want for my husband, the things that I want for my community. I want to be able to sit there and look at the Democratic Party and say, you know what? At the end of the day, when all else fails, the policies and the people that I support are righteous. And I don't feel like that right now. So, motherfuckers, win me back.
Good points. Well, I hope you have a great evening, Ms. Nakia. We'll catch you on the next go around. Ms. Dixon, your final thoughts before we end the night.
I want to say thank you so much for inviting me on. It was a great show. I enjoyed everyone here and their opinions, and I believe it was a very lively conversation. So I appreciate you doing this after show. A lot of things needed to be said. For the last thing I want to say is I actually wrote this down. And this is to Black people in general, but all allies as well. Anyone who is really looking to actually make a difference in their community. right now, what we need to do is we need to strategize, organize, actualize, and create legislation and policies and processes that we need, regardless of whoever is in power, whether they're Democrat, Republican, Independent. And we need to be able to always play like our back is against the wall, because until we actually receive what we deserved and what we earned, it is. And playing any other way is a losing game. So that's my final words.
Great words, great words. Thank you for coming on the show. I definitely hope you have a great evening on this night. I also want to shout out the organization, Virginia Beach Progressive Caucus. I hope you all look into that and join that in the future as well. I happen to be a member of the Virginia Beach Democratic Committee. Give that a look too, to make sure that if we're upset about the results, we actually help proactively push them forward. And of course, you've been watching the Beach Brothers show. Remember to hit up 1248 South Military Highway for a Southern Volkswagen vehicle from Charlie Roy and the crew. Make sure to catch us on our next shows. An interview of Senator McClellan is in the works, as is a Republican response to how they won too. So catch you guys next time. I hope you have a great night, and here are our outros.
It's never too early or too late to plan for retirement. Let me show you how to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your assets from loss due to catastrophic decisions that may affect you the rest of your life. Please call me.
This show was brought to you by Positive Vibes Incorporated, our consulting services. We do credit fixes, we do tax resolution, we lend private money, and debt consolidation. So if you need some of these services, we're waiting here for you. Credit fixes, tax resolutions, private money, and debt consolidation. Make sure you call Positive Vibes Incorporated.